Tai Lopez, the king of, you know the thing.
Knowledge.
The man with all the Lambos.
Fun to drive up here in the Hollywood Hills.
Well, now he's out of those Hollywood Hills and into crypto. He just launched a coin, and I dug into his project early, and oh boy, it's rough. I would stay away from this thing with a 6-foot pole like you're trying to social distance from the new Transformers movie. But not because I think Tai Lopez is a marketing grifter who will do anything for money. No. The real reason is that his idea is a derivative clone that reheats other people's innovations to benefit no one but himself, which makes it a little bit like his self-help. It all starts with this. This is what we're talking about first today. Radioshack. Radioshack is bringing cryptocurrency to the mainstream with DeFi. Now, if you haven't heard of Radioshack in 7 years, that's because they've almost completely collapsed after failing to adjust to the rise of the internet. And that was sad for many people because they were a nostalgic memory from the 90s. It's even sadder because they were bought out by these two, Tai Lopez and his buddy Alex Mayer. And given that most people associate Tai Lopez with get-rich-quick advertisements seen at 3 a.m. on a YouTube rabbit hole, many people struggled to see the connection between an actual business and Tai. But that struggle is now over since they launched their new coin. And here's their pitch. Radioshack is an 100-year-old brand embedded into global consciousness, and we are going to lead the way for blockchain tech to reach mainstream adoption by other large brands. Now, this is quite interesting. The brand that is going to lead us into the future is the one that died because it failed to grasp it the first time. Now, how are they going to do that? Well, they say this. How will we make this bridge? Radioshack DeFi will start with a swap. We believe that this is the lowest hanging fruit that is full of opportunities. Our symbiosis with Atlas USV will allow us to offer the most efficient and competitive swap on the market. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell is Atlas USV? And we'll get to that in a moment, but it's important to recognize all the powerful connections that Radioshack has to offer to make Radioshack Crypto a big success. According to them, they're partnered with REV, Pier 1, Dressbarn, and Steinmart, which, if you haven't paid attention recently, all are basically failing businesses that have nothing to do with crypto. But what they all have in common is actually that they're all owned and bought by Tai and Alex. They bought them at low prices, hoping to revitalize them. So in essence, these guys are starting a crypto company partnered with themselves and a bunch of businesses that failed to adjust to the modern age. Irony, ladies and gentlemen, is officially dead. Unless you can explain to me how Dressbarn is going to make you succeed with crypto, I'm not exactly seeing how these connect here. But now let's move on to this Atlas USV thing, the symbiosis they talked about. USV is an acronym for Universal Store of Value, and it's another crypto token that is created by, drumroll please, Tai Lopez and his buddy Alex Mayer, which basically means that Tai Lopez is teaming up with Tai Lopez, backed by Tai Lopez, and I'm sure funded by Tai Lopez. Now, it calls itself a community-driven project despite basically being launched by just two guys. But even though that makes about as much sense as saying Radioshack is going to bring us into the future, I think at least they're still being consistent with about as accurate as these claims are. But, you know, it really gets amazing when you start looking at their white paper. This could have been an anonymous project, and I would have instantly known that it had knowledge inside of it. Why? Well, because of the quotes. Bear in mind, you have to understand, most white papers or technical documents describe what they do, what these tokens do, like in math terms, right? It's mostly just numbers and economics. This has very little of that, very little math, and it makes up for that in famous people quotes from books Tai has read. Now, there's no way to convey this to you without actually just telling you about all the stuff he jam-packed into this white paper. So I'm just going to go through all of them with you. First, he quoted renowned evolutionary psychologist Dr. David Buss. He then quoted mathematician John Forbes Nash. Then they talked about the Aristotelian mean. They then quoted Charlie Munger's saying, "Beware of perverse incentives." They then go through Robert Triver's evolutionary theory on reciprocal altruism. They then talk about Charles Darwin saying, "The sight of the peacock gives me nightmares," which I can certainly see how that's relevant to crypto. Then they say, as Freud wrote, "Suffering comes from three quarters." They then say, like the Aesop fables, all find themselves to be both the lion and the mouse. By the way, we're still talking about a crypto coin here. Then they talk about Adam Smith. They then quote the Bible, only to follow it up with Richard Dawkins. They quote Warren Buffett, and then they quote Charles Mackay to top it all off. Now look, it's awesome that you know who these guys are. It's great. It's great that you've read books. But unfortunately, reading a bunch of books and knowing a bunch of quotes is kind of irrelevant to a technical paper about a token. to just fill it with so many quotes about Charles Darwin and the peacock. I mean, quite frankly, I fail to see the connection. But am I saying that they just filled this thing with a lot of quotes to avoid having to do actual math? No, of course not. Don't be so cynical. What I am saying, though, is that I agree with Token Sniffer, which is an automated audit, and they said that this thing gets about a 20 out of 100 on their what they call a smell test. And according to them, there's a high risk of this type of token being a scam now or in the future. But I also think it's pretty funny that after all this talk about their theories, Nash equilibriums, and Charles Darwinian ideas about what makes the ideal token, the contract for this token is actually completely similar to a bunch of other projects. Take, for instance, this coin right here, which was done 21 days before their coin. The difference between these two contracts is literally 3 lines of code, most of which are just changing the name on the contract. That's right, guys. This idea isn't new at all. It's been done by tons of projects before and repackaged with a lot of fancy language to make it look like it's just Tai Lopez's idea, and maybe he can get the money this time. In fact, it's so similar to so many other coins that I'm starting to think that the real quote Tai Lopez has learned from is actually from Pablo Picasso. Good artist copy, con artist steal.